Sorry about that, folks. I actually hit the wrong damn button here in the studio, and I killed my feed. That was my fault entirely. But we are back. You may have to refresh your player if needed. But we are back live. Completely sorry about that. Total brain fart here in the studio this morning. But we're talking about global threats and everything. And I was saying before I cut myself off that we have to look at terrorism in small town America. Because everybody, has this thought that, I live in the middle of nowhere and I'm safe. So we're going to watch this story out of Texas as it develops, and hopefully it comes down to somebody who's doing something stupid and not a terror-related event. So let's go global now and look at some of these major threats that the next president already has to face. They don't even have the title yet, and they're going to have to deal with these issues because our current president has done nothing to address any of these issues, nothing at all. And, the first one here comes from the Times of Israel. And, I talk a lot about Iran on the show, the way they've been acting out, their ballistic missile tests, the fact that they overproduced their nuclear material just so they would sell it to the United States to make sure that nuclear deal stays in place. I mean, just horrific, ridiculous stuff. And they made a huge, huge threat today, actually. Iranian state media had General Hussein Salami, I love that name, or Salami, raising up this rhetoric and really pushing back against, the narrative that this president and this administration kind of pushes on everybody that, Iran is our buddy and we can trust them now. This general is the commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, their top forces there. He's the guy that was also wounded. Reports were there that he was wounded in Syria in the fighting there. He's a bad guy. At one time, you may remember, General Petraeus actually called him one of the most feared military commanders and a guy to watch on the world stage here. This commander here, it was echoing the sentiments of the supreme leader, the Ayatollah, who said Monday that the U.S. needs to really get out of the Persian Gulf. And what he said on their state-controlled media was that, quote, Americans should learn from recent historical truths, referring to the capture of those 10 U.S. sailors. The ones that Joe Biden and Obama told us, that they weren't captured, they were helping them out, that sort of thing. He went on to say, if the Americans and their regional allies want to pass through the Strait of Hormuz and threaten us, we will not allow any entry. And then he finished by saying, Americans cannot make safe any part of the world. Now, the Persian Gulf has been a sticking point for years and years, all the way back to the 80s. Where the U.S. and Iran actually fought a one-day naval battle back April 18th, 1988, after the near sinking of the missile frigate, the USS Samuel Roberts, by an Iranian mine. That day, U.S. forces attacked 2 Iranian oil rigs and sank or damaged 6 Iranian vessels. Then, of course, we've talked about the hostage situations over the years, the Iranians being involved in the Iraq conflict, which I'm telling you, folks, I saw it personally with my own eyes. They were there. The Strait of Hormuz is critical, absolutely critical to, national security. It's critical to the economy. So much of the world's trade travels through that one little area. And Iran has threatened, many times to close that off. But that would be an outright, flat out, in your face, declaration of war, as far as I'm concerned. So, compounding everything there, you have this major issue, and you take it a bit further and look at who are the Iranians all buddy with? Well, it's the Russians and the Chinese, extremely buddy with each other, and it's something to be very watchful of and very, very mindful of, as we move forward. And so let's actually talk about their buddy, Iran's buddy, the Russians. huge concern of mine on so many levels because of, their expansion, their, tripling their, they're tripling their defense spending. I mean, horrific stuff. And we talked a lot over the last couple of weeks about, all the craziness that the Russians have been doing. And, among those, the buzzing of, our ships there in the Baltic Sea, that attack profile type thing. Twice they've done barrel rolls over top of spy planes. This is a major deal. And I've been watching this and talking about it damn near every day for a year. And slowly but surely, others are starting to talk about this. And I want you to check out the comments from Secretary of Defense Ash Carter. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but it's worth getting into again today. Speaking from Stuttgart, Germany, the same speech where Carter, announced the death of the Navy SEAL in Iraq, he sent a very pointed warning to Russia in regards to NATO. And it all comes on, these latest incidents, if you want to call it that. I call it a threat. But Carter was, he didn't piss around here. He said, quote, "We do not seek to make Russia an enemy, but make no mistake. We will defend our allies, the rules-based international order, and the positive future it affords us." He said Russia seeks to erode the peaceful order that Europe and the rest of the West have enjoyed since the end of the Cold War. Now, he didn't specifically mention, those overflights or those barrel rolls, but he did accuse Russia's leader of nuclear saber rattling and putting the entire world at risk. This is a big time conversation here, and for the Secretary of Defense to come out and make a statement like that, folks, you got to pay attention to this. And Desi says on the thread here, who's it going to be? Russia, Iran, North Korea, the Muslims? I think it will start with the Muslims and expand. I fully expect USA to be the next major war zone. It's hard to say, and it's absolutely a possibility. But, Badger was hitting on it during his show, the possibility of a global conflict, a World War II, World War I style all-out conflict is very, very real. And these just aren't words coming from Secretary Carter. They're backing this shit up, all right? Right now, we currently have about 60,000 U.S. soldiers stationed in Europe. And, back in the Cold War era, we had about 200,000 there. So what Carter announced Tuesday was something we talked about, was the Pentagon has now pledged $3.4 billion in next year's budget. That's 4 times what they spent last year to beef up the eastern flank of Europe. A complete new armored brigade will be heading to Europe, though Fox News says it's not going to get there until 2017. Carter also said the increase in funds would support an additional U.S. Air Force F-15 squadron, more special forces training in Europe, and more submarine hunting aircraft to counter the increased Russian submarine activity. He said that, quote, "Russia's aggressive actions only serve to further its isolation and unite our alliance." Crazy. Absolutely freaking crazy here. And, they also talked about, moving even more forces into Eastern Europe. But Carter said they're waiting on consultation with NATO officials. But he said that about 4,000 soldiers, basically 4 whole battalions, could soon get added to Eastern Europe. This is major. Okay, this is absolutely major. And what I talk about all the time, when it comes to Russia is all they're trying to do is stick their finger in our eye and poke the sleeping bear a little bit. They want to get us all pissed off, get us all riled up, so then it comes out and we look like we're the aggressors, we're the bad guy. That's what they want. And so what is Russia's response to this? Every time we complain about, one of their extreme, actions they take, like those barrel rolls and the overflights and all that, they come out and say, oh, I don't know why the West is so scared of us. It's propaganda for them. But check out the story here from Yahoo News. Russia has announced that they will reinforce its western and southern flank with 3 new divisions by the end of the year. They're threatening retaliation to NATO's plans to boost their military presence in Poland and the Baltic states. So here you have the United States, you have the Secretary of Defense, Ash Carter, saying, hey, we're going to build up Eastern Europe. We're supporting NATO. NATO's pissed off about, Russia's involvement in Syria, all their extreme actions all over the world, their military buildup, not to mention their support of the rebels, quote-unquote rebels in Ukraine. So these tensions have been building for some time now. And so now you have these 2 superpowers who have not gotten along at all, both announcing plans to build up the eastern front of Europe. Scary. Scary, scary stuff. NATO Secretary Jens Stoltenberg confirmed that the NATO alliance is going to now deploy a battalion-sized multinational units on a rotational basis throughout Poland and the Baltic states. And the Russians they're so pissed off about this, and they act like they don't understand why. Who is this? Russian Foreign Minister Department Head Andrei Kalin said the proposed NATO deployment was a source of concern, and Russia once held sway in Eastern Europe as the Soviet-era overlord. That's what they want to get back to, folks. That's what they want. Keelan went on to say, this would be very dangerous buildup of armed forces pretty close to our borders. I'm afraid this would require certain retaliatory measures, which the Russian Defense Ministry is already talking about. So they say these 3 new Russian divisions would most likely be motorized rifle divisions and have about 10,000 soldiers each. So 3 brand new divisions totaling about 30,000 soldiers. And they're going to start putting them on the eastern front of Europe. It's bad news. This is so bad news, folks. And we've talked about, their expansion and their technology and the way they're approaching things. I mean, the writing's on the wall. Okay? The writing is on the wall that bad things are going to happen. And we have to pay attention to it. We have to be cognizant of it. And our leaders, our elected officials, have to be paying attention to this stuff. And did you see this ridiculous response? I don't even know why they said this. I mean, this is so pointless to me. They just posted the article from Fox News. Admiral John Richardson, who is the chief of naval operations, said that the Russian jets buzzing a U.S. military ship and our planes are escalating the tensions. Okay, no shit. Surprise, surprise. But then he said, my hope is that we can stop this sort of activity. I don't think the Russians are trying to provoke an incident. I think they're trying to send a signal. He said, I think it's pretty clear they are wanting to let us know that they see that we're up here in the Baltic. Folks, that is the freaking understatement of the year. Of course they see that we're there. Of course they're sending a message. I do believe that they're trying to provoke an incident. And Richardson, said that these actions increase the chance of a tactical miscalculation, but if an incident were to occur, the U.S. would tamp down any rise in tensions between the 2 countries. He said we look for sort of a normalization there. I have a major, major problem with that. And again, I'm not advocating for war. I'm absolutely not a warmonger or anything. But yeah, James says, did he think about that before he said it? Talk about sending this message of contrite, this message of pussification. That if there's an incident, we're going to try and downplay it. Now, is he wrong in what he said? No. Under this president, I truly believe that their sole focus, if there was an incident, be it accidental or intentional, they would try to spin it. They would try to downplay this. But I'm not saying that's the right thing. That's the absolute wrong approach. And, look at the way the Russians talk. Look at the way the Iranians talk. both the stories that we cover on those two countries today, they talk directly about